Hello and welcome to another ASP.NET Core coding tutorial from Round the Code. Now today we're going to go ahead and actually set up a Blazor WebAssembly application in Azure. Come the end of this video, you would have successfully been able to actually deploy a Blazor WebAssembly to Azure and also integrate it with an API. Now this continues our series where we basically take a Blazor WebAssembly with an API and deploy it to Azure. In earlier episodes, we went ahead and actually got the repos into Azure Devops, and in the last episode, in part 2, we set up the API and the SQL Server database. Now in future episodes, we're going to have a look at looking at errors in Azure, ASP.NET Core errors, and we're also going to have a look at access restrictions, particularly important for APIs. Now for more ASP.NET Core coding tutorials, visit roundthecode.com. Subscribe to my YouTube channel at youtube.com/roundthecode and follow me on Twitter, it's @roundthecode. So let's now go ahead and create our Blazor WebAssembly application in Azure. So we're going to go ahead now and set up our Blazor WebAssembly application in Azure. So in order to do that, we need to set up a new web app. Let's go ahead and click on that. So we're going to select the resource group to Round the Code. I'm going to give it a name. I'm going to call it Round the Code Blazor Wasm. So this will reside to Round the Code Blazor Wasm.azurewebsites.net. I'm going to publish code and select .NET Core 3.1. We're going to select UK South and we're going to create a new Windows plan here. I'm just going to call it Round the Code 1. For some reason the other Windows plan was throwing an error, so we'll go ahead with that. Just go through to the end, and then we're going to go ahead and create our web application. So as you can see, this is going to take a little bit of time to actually set up and deploy, so we'll come back when it's ready. Okay, so you can see now the deployment is complete, the actual resource has been set up, the actual server. So now we need to go ahead and actually deploy the code to it. So like with the API, we do exactly the same thing. We go down here, we go to Deployment and Deployment Center. So once again, you can select which particular repository you're using, whether you're using Azure Repos or GitHub. It doesn't really matter. You can select whichever one that comes up here. We're going to go for Azure Repos, which we set up during part 1. We're going to set up Azure Pipelines again. And yep, so we've got our round code 2, which we set up in part 1 from our DevOps. We're going to select Blazor Wasm. And now we're going to select the repository and the relevant branch. So we're going to set up master. So every time there's a commit to master, it will do a continuous deployment. It will basically do a deployment to the Blazor Wasm server that was just set up in Azure. And select ASP.NET Core, continue. There's a summary, so it's going to go ahead and create that. Okay, so that's set up our continuous delivery for our Blazor Wasm application. What this has also done is it's actually triggered a build and release. So if we go into release pipeline, this is going to take us back to Azure. So we've got our pipeline here. This is what it's currently running at the moment. So if we go in here, you can see it's already doing a build for it. So this is just basically initializing the job. It will basically do a build of the project and then it will publish it to our server. It will basically do a release to our Azure server. So it has to go through and actually finish this job first, and then as a result of that job of the build, it will actually create a release. So we'll come back when the release has been complete. So as you can see now, the build has been complete and it's now set up a release. So it's just going ahead and actually doing the release for us. So as you can see, the release has now been done. It should all be working. So let's give it a go. So we've got our actual Blazor WebAssembly here. Let's load it up and see if it's going to work. So yeah, you can see our actual WebAssembly application is now working in Azure. But let's give it a test. So we've already integrated it with the API. So we're going to basically this should integrate with the create method in the API. So the API /teams/create. Let's see if it's going to work. So we're just going to put some test credentials in here. Oh dear, we've got an error. Let's have a look at developer tools and see what's going on there. So if we go into console, you can see here it says no access control allow origin header is present on the requested resource. So this is to do with CORS. So basically in the API you have to give it permission as to which resources, which applications can actually access it and actually do requests from it. So in order for it to return data. Now you can do this in code in an ASP.NET Core application, or with Azure, there's actually, because we set it up as an API app, there's actually a CORS section. So let's take you to that. So if we go and we load up our CRUD API app service, so what we can do here is we can go down to API and CORS. So we're going to tick enable access control allow credentials. Not sure if that's relevant for this, but we're also going to add our Blazor Wasm URL in here. So to basically tell the API that, you know, we want you to allow it to access it. So it's round the code Blazor Wasm.Azure websites.net. Just going to check that's the right URL. In fact, I'm going to copy that in just to make sure. Okay, so let's give that a save. So hopefully now, if we try that again, so we're going to refresh the web page, and hopefully this time it will actually allow us to do it. So we're going to remove developer tools and we're going to create a new record. There we go. You see it's created a new record. So we've given that access to the actual API, which means it can now basically communicate with it. Just going to demonstrate that. We're going to edit one as well, update one. There you can see it's successfully integrating with our API. So in our next part, we're going to be basically looking at access restrictions in Azure. So basically we don't allow everyone to see our API. In addition to that, we're also going to look at how we deal with ASP.NET Core errors in Azure. That's all coming up in part 4, so make sure you check it out.